Good evening, caller. Welcome to New Worldview. What's your first name? Where you calling from?
Yeah, this is Maurice from Southwest.
Yes, sir.
I wanted to ask Dr. Umar about why is everybody so concerned about what happened at the Capitol building? Because the way I see it, this is America. Everybody, especially when they talk to our people, we talk about patriotism and how great America is, and I'm wondering who are they talking about when they're doing this? And they're talking to all the concern. As far as I'm concerned, nobody black got killed. I don't care what they do in Washington right now, because that was my people out there. Why are we so concerned about his people showing their true character, and we acting like we're so surprised this happened? This is what's been happening all the time. I don't understand it. Can you help me with that, sir?
Here's the thing. We have to pay attention to all major political developments because they sooner or later will impact us. Remember, when the AIDS virus was first, quote-unquote, discovered, and I put that in quotes because they invented it, we were told that it was a disease for homosexual white males. Here we are some 50 years later, 40 years later, about 30 to 40 years later, because that was the early 80s, and HIV/AIDS is the leading killer of heterosexual black women between the ages of 40 and 60. So we have to pay attention because a lot of times what they do to distract black people from what's coming is they'll put the entire crisis in white face so you think it has nothing to do with you. My opinion of what happened at the Capitol the other day, the first time that the governmental headquarters was overrun by quote-unquote insurgents since the War of 1812, that was an inside job. There's no way Donald Trump could have done that on his own. I received information that suggested that the police were even letting some of these insurgents in, letting them pass the barricades. I received something today that says Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas's white wife, and of course you know he's married to George Bush's cousin, but anyway, his white wife had funded the buses that brought the insurgents to D.C. That was an inside job. And I believe it was for one of two reasons. Number one, to see how Americans would respond to the overrunning of their governmental headquarters by insurgents. Number one, it was a test run for something that is larger to come. I believe, my personal opinion, is that was a test run to desensitize Americans to white folk who will ignore the government and commit crimes against black folks. That was a test run. Or number two, they wanted to make Donald Trump look so bad to make the world think that Joe Biden is ushering in a new era. I don't know if it's A, I don't know if it's B, but I definitely know that that was an inside job, that it was not an accident, and that was not purely collaborated by a bunch of angry young white people.
I said something very similar. I said that it certainly looked like it was both staged and choreographed. It wasn't just coincidental. And I thought that they would have been an inside job as well because they allowed that to happen, and they wanted it to happen so that they could have these images to show. It's because it's all about imagery and the optics. And so if they didn't allow the men to decimate the Capitol, then they wouldn't have had those images to show. So they needed that. So that's why they allowed it. For whatever reason they wanted to have that happen, I'm not really sure. I don't want to take no guess, except that it will expose the hypocrisy of America. That's what it really exposed. As a matter of fact,
I totally agree with you there, Baba David. And to me, it's almost like COVID. It's another test run to see how Americans will respond to that type of obvious threat against the government posed by its own citizens. And it could be a setup. You know why? Because if it happens against us, where a group of whites decide that they want to inflict mass violence on black people, the government can look like they were not able to control it because they were not even able to repel the insurgents who crossed the line to the government. That's what it looks like to me. Let us desensitize black people now, so when white folks run down on them and we don't stop them, we can just tell them that we were unable to because, after all, you saw what they did to us in D.C.
And what astonishes me is that there was a Capitol Police officer that died from the incident, and there were four other people that died from that incident or the cause of that incident. And I always thought that if a law enforcement officer was killed during the commission of a crime, and trespassing by itself is a crime, that everybody involved is accountable. The same way that they did Move on Powelton Avenue. Move wasn't shooting out the cellar window at the police were shooting into the window, and because one policeman got killed with friendly fire, they charged everybody in the building that Move and gave them 40 years. Because they were participating in the commission of a crime, even though they weren't committing the crime. I guess their crime was resisting death.
Those so-called insurgents risked the life and safety of American legislators, something that this country claims to take very seriously. Mm-hmm. You had Supreme Court, you had Congress, okay? Mm-hmm. The president was near there, the vice president. Had black people done that, not only would it probably have gotten you life, some people would have probably been sentenced to execution because people lost their lives. Mm-hmm. And as far as those who lost their lives, and of course, you know, my heart goes out to their family no matter who they were, okay, because I don't like to see that mm-hmm. happen to anybody. That's right. But that was collateral damage. We know that the United States government has a rich history. That's why I have to do these crash courses. The United States of America has a rich history of killing its own to achieve political ends. We know that America knew the Japanese were coming to bomb Pearl Harbor, and they agitated them to make sure they did it. We know that America has sent its troops into battle just to be killed to justify the murder. We look at 9/11, and there's enough evidence that has come out since 9/11 to show that the government knew that that would happen and did nothing about it. And we have sufficient evidence to suggest that it was not Al-Qaeda who did it either, that was also an inside job. So this country has a history of killing its own citizens to achieve political ends. So the fact that 4 or 5 people died, again, we're sorry for that. We wish that never happened, regardless of the color of their skin. But at the same time, we know that this government will do something like that to make sure that this event appears to be organic and authentic.
And we're back live here in the studios of 96.1 FM, 900 AM, streaming live worldwide at WURDradio.com. I'm David Barnes, photo man for YouTube, and I'm your host on this Dr. Umar Johnson edition of New World View. On the phone line with us is Dr. Johnson, and I want to welcome you back. And we have a caller on the phone line that we're going to go to. Good evening, caller. What's your first name? Where are you calling from?
God bless, Brother Dave.
Yes, sir.
And God bless, Brother Dr. Umar Johnson. How y'all making now?
Peace, black man.
Give y'all the glory. As always, give thanks for y'all work, and I'm glad to hear you on the air, my brother.
Me too.
Thank you. Thanks, y'all. Keep rocking. And God bless everyone, as always, but I'm going to keep it brief. And I'm sorry I tuned in a little later. Y'all might have alluded to it a little bit. I heard you addressing some of it. But with all the events of 2020, everything going on, I was going to ask, what would you say with being distracted from that, you know, like what they working to get away with that we don't pay attention to? Mm-hmm. Like I heard one empress on the radio talk about, I think it was during the elections, how they was also looting the treasury. Mm-hmm. But no one was talking about that because we was caught up in the hype. So, especially with the recent hype, I was just wondering, I'd like to hear your input, Dr. Umar Johnson. I value it, you know what I mean? Whatever you're at liberty to say. More
yes, sir. Yes, sir. As I was saying earlier before the break, I believe that was a test run on martial law or some sort of a tragic social incident. I mean, if we go back in our history, you had the Red Hot Summer of 1919. You had the Red Hot Summer of 1966. There was 30-something race riots. 1967, you had over 160 different race riots. Let me say that again. 1967, you had over 160 different race riots. And then, of course, you had the dozens of race riots that followed the assassination of Dr. King. And then under the Obama era, because he wouldn't speak out for black people at all, you had all of the different riots that grew out of a result of police genocide. And so I think there's something bigger coming that's going to be totally orchestrated by the government. You know, I hate to say it, but what we saw at the Capitol building, that was not done for nothing. Okay, they did not do that test run. They did not put that stunt for the world to see unless it was a set up for a setback. something is coming down the pike, and it's going to be much greater than a couple of crazy white folks running into the Capitol. And black people need to be organized. We need to be aware, and we need to be alert. As I said, at the outbreak of COVID, this decade is the decade of experiments and eugenics. It is the decade of experiments and eugenics. And we had better be careful as a people, because they are really looking, I believe, to intensify their eugenics campaign. I mean, let us remember, Global 2000 was supposed to split the black population in half. It didn't do it.
Yeah, the Y2K
HIV epidemic was supposed to split the black population in half. That didn't do it. I just read a report yesterday that talked about black America having a burgeoning growth rate. So while 25 American states are having a declining white birth rate, in the inner cities of America, the so-called ghetto, you're having an explosion of black birth. So they're not going to let that happen. They have to cut our numbers down. And this, again, I think, was a test run for something bigger that's coming.
Well, how do you think that we should prepare for that? I mean, what do we do? Start building
we got to be organized,
right?
Number one. We got to have our defense. Number two, we also have to have our food together, our water together, disaster preparedness. If you think about it, this whole century, since the year 2000, white folks have been constantly pushing this disaster preparedness concept. Black people had better wake up to it, because from what I've read, most white suburbs, they're ready. Most white people in the inner city, they're ready. Chinese are ready. The Mexicans are ready. Latinos. Black people are the only community in America that is not systemically ready for any type of a major crisis that would reach the level of martial law that will require us to enact disaster preparedness protocol. Do you have enough water? Do you have a way to cook the food? Do you have a way to dispose of human waste if you can't leave the house? Because human waste can kill you if you can't get it away from you. We had better get ready, because it's coming. It's not a question of if, it's only a question of when, and I believe it will be before this decade ends.
Wow. So we better start learning some survival skills. That's what we need to do. And
where's the highest point in the city? Where's the lowest point in the city? Do we have any boats set up in case we got to get women and children and elders out, down the Schuylkill River, down the Delaware River? We don't have anyone working on that. We are a disorganized people from head to toe, and we don't want to admit it, because most of us are not interested in sacrificing money or time to make sure all of us will be in a good position. That is our problem. The average Negro isn't interested in sacrificing anything that he has to make sure the entire group is well off.
So we have another caller on the phone line. If you want to join the conversation, you can do so by dialing 215-634-8065. We're talking to Dr. Umar Abdul Johnson, certified child psychologist. Good evening, caller. What's your first name? Where you calling from?
Good evening, Eric from New Orleans. How y'all doing?
Hey, Eric. How you doing? Good.
Yeah. Yes, the continuous onslaught of television commercials and TV shows with black men with white women and black women with white men. Is that part of the eugenics movement also, you say?
A part of it is part of the eugenics movement. Another part of it is the psychological warfare against black people to make us think that the larger society actually cares about us. Remember, confusion is a very potent political weapon. It's very potent. And the reason confusion is so potent as a political weapon is because when people are confused, they do not act. When people are confused, they do not act. They just stand still and wait for clarification and confirmation. And so confusing black people has been one of the most effective strategies that the U.S. government has been using since Dr. King's murder.
And so maybe that's why black people aren't getting ready, because they so confused. They say, oh, they ain't going to do nothing. They don't believe that.
They don't believe it. They don't believe it at all. We have more faith in the government than I think even white people have in the government. And that's why they can always catch us off guard. They can always catch us by surprise, because we have absolute faith in the United States government to look out for our best interests, ironically, something it has never done.
Never. So you had another question and comment, Eric?
Yes. Do you all believe that blacks have more faith in the white society than we have faith in God?
I believe that. I totally agree with you. I totally agree with you. That's why the white man has become the black man's God, as you see with the white Jesus.
I'm not sure if I would say that black people have more faith in white people than God. I think that black people believe in God, but they're scared of white people. So what's better, fear or love?
Both. We have both. I would argue that the two emotions that you usually only have for your creator and for your parents are fear and love. You tend to fear your mom and dad. You love your mom and dad when you're a child. You fear God. You love God. But for black people, that has also been transposed onto the government itself. We fear the government and we love the government. I believe black people believe in God, too. But their faith is in the white man. It is absolutely in the white man.
Yeah, they say they believe in what they can see in front of them, not what they might see later on.
Absolutely.
Man, that's interesting. Well, I don't believe in them, that's for sure, and I don't trust them. That's absolutely for sure. So, Eric, thank you so much for. But Eric, before you go, what did you think about the situation that happened in Washington? What's your spin on that?
Yeah, from the information I heard, like, for example, they said that these guys were just able to scale these walls like the way they did. They said the average person, a man, can't do that. It takes training to do that type of task. And so generally the people who can do that are military people, or militarily trained people.
Or roaches. Roaches could do that.
Yeah, you know. So.
But you know what? But speaking about that, did Dr. Johnson? I don't know if you heard this or not, but they had some police that was involved in the demonstration, the protest. They had buses from Philadelphia that went down there that was supposedly the mummers sponsored by the FOP.
I wasn't aware of that.
Buses right here from Philadelphia that took the protesters down there. And so I said, well, I know it because, as Eric was just saying, some of those people had to be trained. And I was looking at it on television, and I swear it looked like the same people that had infiltrated our demonstrations and was the ones that was breaking the windows and burning up stores. It wasn't us that was doing it, it was them. And it was those same people that was in Washington, you know, those agent provocateurs that was... They want to create chaos.
Absolutely. And regardless of whether people believe that was a government orchestrated stunt, and I certainly do, or whether they believe it was organically done, one thing cannot be disputed, and that is the way that the police interact with white people and the way they interact with black people is totally different. We saw it on TV. Had black people done what those white people done, they would have all been shot and killed. None of them would have survived.
Most of them,
how gentle they were. I mean, pepper spray is what they used. Okay, pepper spray and tear gas. Yes, a few people were shot, but almost nobody. When you look at 5 people out of the hundreds who were there, that's less than 1% of the people who actually end up getting shot. Totally, it exposed how racist America is, and it shows that when they kill black people, they do it on purpose. It is intentional when they kill black people, and at the same time, they will go out of their way to not take the life of a white person, even if they're armed.
Look at the sister that was driving in Washington near the White House and got lost and turned around and ran into and they killed her with her children in the car.
Absolutely. Or the brother who was shot, and I forget where he lived, the brother who's paralyzed now. He had his 3 sons in the back seat, I believe, and they just concluded the other day that the police officer who shot him will not be charged.
Yeah.
So, you know, that clearly shows you there's a double standard. Everybody's aware of it, and it's not going to stop, as Frederick Douglass, you know, told us more than 125 years ago, and I visited his grave last weekend when I was speaking up in Rochester, well, the book signing in Rochester. And he told us, power concedes nothing without a demand. Okay, the limits of tyrants are prescribed by the people they oppress. This will continue until we do something about it. There is no legal or political solution to this. There's no law that can be passed to stop it, okay? And there's no person you can vote in office who's going to stop it either. Black people are going to have to stop this themselves. But we haven't had that type of aggressive black activism at least since the 60s. So most of the black people walking around today, they never even heard of black people standing up and demanding their respect from the police, which is why it's going to be difficult to even bring us to that level of alarm because most of us have not seen it. The children who are growing up today, these young people in their 20s and 30s, many of them don't even have grandparents who experienced the civil rights movement, much less even read about it.
And, it's interesting you said... Oh, go ahead, Eric.
Yes, I wanted to ask you something. A lot of times, black families will reach out to the police when there's a family dispute, and of course, a lot of times when the police come, they will exacerbate the problem and injure black families or kill black family members. What can the black community do to solve our own domestic problems so that we won't have to reach out to the police?
It's funny you say that because tomorrow I'm going to be a guest on Fox Soul. If anybody wants to watch it, 11 o'clock tomorrow night. And the topic is a panel discussion on child support. And your question just bringing me back to tomorrow's topic because we as a black community need systems. Now, we have to build institutions. We know that. But en route to building the institutions, we need systems. Why don't we have a system of elders, a council of elders in every community that can resolve disputes between brothers and sisters and husbands and wives and mothers and fathers so we can stop going back to the same people who destroyed the black family to help legislate within the black family. It's a total contradiction for us to say that we love liberty, and the minute we have a problem with each other, we run to the right man to solve the dispute.
That is true. In fact, a lot of black women now, not just black women, but a lot of black women now, when they get angry at their boyfriend, spouse, or other, the first thing they want to do is call the police. And I said, why would you call the police to bring them into that situation? And they say, well, because, I just wanted to get them out the house. I said, but once you call the police, they said, well, I wouldn't let it get out of hand. I said, no, you can't control that. Because once you call the police, they taking control over that situation, and ain't nothing you could do. They're going to do whatever they want to do. They said, you should have called us in the first place if you ain't wanted this to happen.
And part of that stems from the fact that black people don't respect other black people. I mean, another thing we have to deal with, too, when you deal with the Willie Lynch, the post-traumatic slavery disease, the psychological residuals of the Ma'afa, you have to also deal with this concept of black anarchy. We are anarchists towards one another. We do not believe in law and order when it comes to one another. You can't, because if you believe in law and order when it comes to one another, you have to believe in accountability and responsibility to each other. Black people don't want none of that. Black people are not thinking about being accountable to other black folks. That's why we're so quick to call the police. That's why we will yield to a white manager, but we will not yield to a black manager. We are totally segregationists when it comes to other black folks. We're only integrationists when it comes to non-black folks. Somebody needs to do a research study on the segregationist black mind within the black community.
Well, who was it? Du Bois had the fight of two souls. But
yes, the struggle of two souls, the souls of black folk. He said the black consciousness, the black mindset, and he was profound in saying that, and nobody could have said it better than W.E.B. Du Bois, because with all due respect to him, he was definitely a racially conflicted Negro who thought that his education should automatically earn him a place in the white aristocracy, and it didn't. And as a result of that, he became angry with America. He defected from America. He renounced his American citizenship. A lot of people do not know this. He renounced his American citizenship late in life and sailed to Ghana, where he took up residence with Osajifo Dr. Kwame Nkrumah. He started working on his Encyclopedia Africana project. Du Bois gave up his American citizenship, and the irony is Marcus Garvey told him 50 years ago that you will never be accepted by white folks, no matter how many degrees you got. And it took Du Bois, a Harvard-trained scholar, took him 50 years to come to the conclusion that Marcus Garvey came to in his 30s.
That is true. So that before I forget, before other people forget or may not have written it down, you're going to be on Fox Soul tomorrow at 11 p.m. That's a local station here in Philadelphia, or is it on cable?
Fox Soul, I think they're based in Los Angeles, but you can watch them. They have an app, a free app that you can download, the Fox Soul app, and also foxsoul.tv, I believe is the website, foxsoul.tv. They bring me on ever so often to discuss pertinent topics in the black community. The last conversation we had, I was on with Steve Perry, who's an excellent educator up in New York. We was talking about the school system. They also had me on to talk about the image of the black woman. I was on there to talk about COVID and education, and now we're going to talk about child support, probably the hottest topic that I've had to discuss up until now. And let me also let people know that we will be in Brooklyn this coming Tuesday, the day after tomorrow, to celebrate Dr. Khalid Abdul Muhammad's 72nd solar return, okay, from Spirit. We will be there, and we will be at the Magnolia Tree, 677 Lafayette Avenue. I repeat, the Magnolia Tree in Brooklyn, 677 Lafayette Avenue, Tuesday, January the 12th, from 4 until 9. Dr. Khaled's 72nd Earth Day commemoration, and Dr. Umar will speak at about 6 o'clock.
And you know what? I remember Dr. Khaled very fondly. When I was in Dakar, Senegal with Reverend Leon Sullivan, Dr. Khalid Muhammad was there, and he actually stole the whole show, the whole summit, you know. And I was at the Million Youth March with Dr. Khalid in New York, in Harlem. It was an interesting time that time because they were flying the helicopters real low on the crowd to scare the crowd, disrupt the crowd. And then I watched as the police rushed the stage and just start pushing people off the stage. It was a pretty high stage. And it just police came there, just start pushing people off the stage and dragging them down. And I was saying to myself, the same thing that we're talking about now, why did they have to do that? You know, why do they have to do that, but when they don't do that to white people?
It's because we allow it, number one. And number two, they also have to reinforce this idea of the American African as being some sort of undisciplined savage. See, we got to keep in mind that all media involving black people is meant to do what? Play up this historical notion that we are a step away from animals. You see it with the movies. You see it in the music. And this is why I'm so disappointed with our brothers and sisters in the hip-hop industry who don't do anything but reinforce these negative stereotypes of black folks that white people created more than 100 years ago, and all we do is play them up, constantly talking about sex, constantly talking about killing each other, constantly talking about conspicuous consumption. That's not who we are, but we are being financed to assassinate our own image. And we're actually the first people in world history ever. Two statistics. Number one, we're the first people in human history to participate in their own extermination and the extermination of their public image. And the black man is the first human being in American history in the U.S., the U.K., and South Africa to be the number one cause of his own death.
Did you happen to see Ma Rainey's Black Bottom? Because that was the one thing I took out of that whole movie near the end is when the guy, Chadwick Boseman, killed his band member because he stepped on his shoe. And I'm saying that's so symbolic because black people will kill you just for stepping on their shoe, but they won't even raise their voices at another white person.
Absolutely. If you don't have respect for the next black man or woman, and I'm not talking about their degrees and accomplishments, but if you don't have respect for the next black man or woman, then you are not operating within the African consciousness, because the first thing that you have to have in order to call yourself African is respect for other people who look like you.